My guests have been taught ancient secrets to have God answer your prayers every time.
Can ancient secrets of the supernatural be rediscovered? Do angels exist? Is there life after death? Are healing miracles real? Can you get supernatural help from another dimension? Has the future been written in advance? Sid Roth has spent 30 years researching the strange world of the supernatural. Join Sid on this edition of It's Supernatural.
Hello, Sid Roth here. Welcome to my world where it's naturally supernatural. I can just taste the rarefied air of heaven. Most people I know, they believe in God. They believe that God answers prayers, but they've prayed so many times, and it appeared as though the heavens were brass, and they somehow did not get through to God, and their faith level is all the way down here, and they ask other people to pray for them. There's something wrong with that picture. I'm so excited about my guests, Brenda and Hank Kunneman, because they've got revelation for you. God's going to answer your prayer of, God, why can't I get through to you? It's going to be answered. And if you have young children, teenagers that are sick, there is a special presence of God. They're going to be healed. And if they're not with you for some reason, just take a piece of paper, write their name, and if they're with you, get them out immediately. Well, Hank, you had this burden. You had a problem.
Yes,
Is God going to answer your prayers?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, it was a problem. It was such a problem, Sid, that I would fall asleep in prayer. I would, this lasted like 6 months. I had what I call spiritual attention deficit disorder. I'd go to pray and everything would distract me. I felt like God was a million miles away, and I said, Lord, have I sinned? Have I done something wrong? So I finally decided to do the spiritual thing. Are you ready? Well, to go on a 3-day fast. And I'm talking about not just, fast, Snicker bars for Mars bars or something. I'm talking about, I really was so hungry, I said, I'm going to go out, I'm going to do a water fast. But then I snuck something. I snuck a bag of snacks because the Lord hadn't been talking to me just in case for 6 months. Yeah, I packed it because I'm like, I'm not going hungry. And so I went out for 3 days to seek the Lord.
You're fasting with snacks.
Yeah, well, they were my backup survival kit, Cause
if God doesn't come, I'm eating.
God doesn't show up.
I got you.
That's it. If God doesn't show up, and I'm sure there's people that feel that way where you're like, where is God? But I decided, I'm going to take 3 days and I'm going to go out and I'm going to fast. I'm going to get a hold of this God. I'm going to refuse to leave this God alone. And I read in the Bible where Moses didn't leave him alone, Jacob didn't leave him alone, and the names go on and on. I said, I am going to get a hold of God. So again, I brought my snack survival kit. And what happened is I set everything up in my cabin, and I walked out in the woods to go pray, trying to get a hold of God. Now, keep in mind, I've been falling asleep. I would wake up praying for a fast food restaurant, and that's why they've sold over 1 billion hamburgers, the one I've been praying for. Because I would intercede, and then I would wind up saying the name of that restaurant. I mean, crazy stuff like that. So I was walking through the forest here, woods, and I looked, and off in the distance, in this field were these deer. And I was so determined. I said, God, and I try to quote the scripture that talks about, as a deer panteth forth the water, so my soul longs after you. I was trying to get spiritual with God. And so these deer were out there, and I said, Lord, if you're even listening to me, make those deer come to me. Do you know what happened, Sid? No. I got to tell you, you're not even going to believe this. The deer ran the opposite direction. And I said, that's it. I must have done something wrong.
The ultimate not get your prayers answered.
Right. And I said, God, what did I do? So I was so frustrated, and I don't encourage anyone to do this. I shook my fist at the Lord. I said, God, that's it. And then I do what a lot of times we do when we're really frustrated at God. We try to tell him how to do his job. I said, well, if I was you, Father, if I was God, and somebody was out here trying to seek your face, I would at least have answered, and I would have brought those deer to him, and I began to really be a real brat. And so I decided I had enough, and I sat down and I fell asleep. 45 minutes later, I heard a noise, and I could not believe what I saw. I mean, very close to me, a few feet away, were the very same deer that looked like they went the opposite direction. God was listening. And he brought those deer right next to me. Immediately, I went back into my prayer cabin. And I started to grab the door, and I walked in the door because I was going to repent, because I was in big trouble after what I said, I knew. But the Lord is so merciful. He's such a good Father. He knows when we're brats. And so as soon as I opened the door, the power of God Himself grabbed a hold of me and threw me across the room. And I was literally overcome by the Spirit of God's presence. And He said to me, I've taught you something that'll never be taken from you. It's spiritual pursuit. See, sometimes people only pray when everything's good.
That's right.
Jesus prayed in 3 primary places: the desert, the wilderness, okay? And
That's right.
what was the other one? Desert, wilderness,
The
and
mountaintop.
We
That's
only
when
pray
things
about-
are going
yeah,
good.
when things are
The
going good.
mountaintop.
I like having her here today so she helps me out. But anyway, on the mountaintop, when everything's good. We don't like praying in the valley when things are low. We don't like praying when things are hot. And so I learned something. I learned how to get a hold of God and not to give up. And that's why we have supernatural experiences.
That's right.
Is we've had to press through some pretty hard things.
And that's
Go
kind of
ahead.
how we started our ministry. I think it's just many hours of pacing the floor when it looked like it was not going to go right. And I think that's the big hurdle that many people have to overcome in their pursuit of God, is you're not always going to feel like it. It's not always going to seem like anything's happening. It's not always going to feel like the prayers are working. But that is where you learn to press into God anyway, because when you do, that's when you break through. And of course, I think of the woman with the issue of blood. She had to break through the crowd and press to where Jesus was. And when she did that, she got her answer. And I think that's something in the early years of our ministry. Sid, we are walking in supernatural things today. And I really want the audience to hear this part. We are walking in supernatural things today that we paced the floor and prayed out to God.
Give them an example.
20
The
years
list
ago.
that we had a list. You need to tell them about this.
Yeah, we had this list. We said, God, we need you to do X amount of things in the ministry. We were believing for
We were
big
desperate.
things. They're not so big now,
Right.
but they were huge then. And we just called out to God, put this list on our fridge, had scriptures, prayed them out, slapped that fridge every day. Every time we figured, put it on the fridge. Every time you got to get something to eat, you got to remember what you prayed before the Lord. And we eventually moved out of that house. And several moves later, the list got put in a box. And you always have those boxes that don't get unpacked at the next house.
Sure.
So we probably, I think it was last summer. Was it last summer?
About 2 summers ago, because we got
2
a big
summers.
argument because it was all my stuff
We
that
were
she wanted to
cleaning
go
out
through.
boxes, and I said, we got to get through this stuff.
But you didn't tell them we're on vacation. You're not supposed to do work on
Yeah, we
vacation.
took some time off, and we cleaned out these boxes. And I pulled out this piece of paper and said, I'll bet you can't guess what that was. It was the list.
Of course.
From
how
the
many?
fridge.
How many had
God is my
answered?
witness. That every single thing on that list was answered, and then some. And you know what? It was bigger than we even put on the list.
Yeah,
and I
he did
realized at that
exceedingly
time that we don't even believe God for enough. We don't even ask Him for big enough. It was more.
And here's the deal: Brenda and Hank are not God's favorites. The Messiah is God's favorite, and the Messiah is in them. And guess what? Brainstorm, the Messiah is in you. Or you better say a prayer real quick. Be right back after this word.
We'll be right back to It's Supernatural.
Last year, God told me to host a supernatural tour to Israel. The tour was such a spiritual highlight. We're going to do another one this year in Jerusalem. And we've purposely kept this top quality tour under $3,000, and that includes all taxes and tips.
Call now for a free brochure at 1-800-959-1062 or visit our website at sidroth.org.
We now return to It's Supernatural.
Hello, Sid Roth here with Brenda and Hank Kunneman. And Hank and Brenda, you have walked through it. I think as that young boy, before you even knew God, you heard His voice. How old were you, and what did He say to you?
I was 5 years old on the island of Guam when God's voice came to me for the first time. Wasn't even a Christian. See, God's reaching out to people even before they even know
That's
Him.
right.
And all they have to do is reach back.
Yes.
And He told me, started talking to me about living a life. And He talked in, elementary terms, living a life that was right, doing what was good. And He showed me and talked to me about His creation. And He created these things for my enjoyment. But I'm going to tell you, that is a key because it developed something in me. And that's the key for you watching too, is a hunger for God.
right.
Reach for Him. That's the key. Reach for Him. Sometimes, you're waiting for God to hit you over the head.
Yeah.
And, we have to reach towards Him. And one of the things that happened one time, and I didn't really realize how much God was reaching towards us and how much God really wants to be with us, how much He really loves us, and He longs to be with us. Here's what happened. I was in my prayer room, and of course, we do what everybody does. Now, sometimes being a preacher, you do it worse. You put God on your time. You have this much amount of time in my schedule. And so I had it 1 hour. God, you're going to get 1 hour of my time. And I was ready. I was done. I did my religious duty. I spent 1 hour with God. And so I was getting ready to leave. And as soon as I grabbed the door handle of my room, I heard the most incredible voice. God still speaks today, Sid. And God said these words to me. He said, please. And I stopped. I thought, who is saying please to me? And I heard, please don't leave. Sid.
God said to you?
Yes, to me. The creator
Hank
of the universe.
Kunneman
Yes.
said to you?
Don't leave. Please don't
There's
leave.
something about you that I need to be in your presence. He needs to be in your presence. He needs to be with you. He needs to be with you. Whether you've heard that or not, this is what the Bible says, the truth book. God is not a respecter of persons. If He needs Hank and Brenda, He needs you.
That's right.
That's right. And I'll tell you how important this is. Brenda and I, we spent a lot of time together with the Lord, but we reach back. And one day, it'll come in handy, because when you spend time with God and you take that time to be with Him, and hunger is so important. See, there's times as a preacher, I've sat with God and I've said, Lord, I don't feel your presence. I am bored. I don't like this time. I would rather do something else. But Lord, I'm hungry and I want you and I want your presence. And it doesn't sometimes seem like anything's happening at the moment.
But you know what? Someone can be hungry.
Yes.
And they don't see anything happen, and then they go and watch the ball game.
Yeah, right. Well, but one thing that Jesus had, His private prayer life produced public power. And that's where people miss it. They don't have any public power or any supernatural things because they're not spending time with God. And I want to tell you, we had a thing happen at one time.
Well, and I just feel this too, Sid, that I believe as we're talking, this came right up in my heart by the Lord as God is speaking, even as we're sitting here, that there are people dealing with loneliness. And I just feel like there's somebody out there that you're dealing with loneliness and you're feeling like, man, does anybody care? And as we're talking, you're thinking, well, God, do you care? And I just want to encourage you, this is your moment to be with God. He does care. You don't have to be lonely in your life. And so I just want to encourage you, reach to God. Like you heard Hank say, and like Sid was saying, reach to God, because your lonely moments are going to be fulfilled in Him as He's reaching to you. And so I just feel like to encourage somebody with that by the Spirit.
One time, let me tell you what God does. When you spend time with Him, there's a presence that He will put on your life. And I remember years ago, I was a youth minister, and I was out playing what we call capture the flag, and it was kind of like a hide and seek type game. And all of a sudden, I heard a noise, and I didn't hear it in the natural. I heard it in the spirit, but I thought it was in the natural, and it was a loud sounding noise of music, Sid. And all of a sudden, I grabbed the youth leaders, and I said, get all the kids right now. And it was pretty late at night. It was almost about midnight. I said, get all the kids quickly. Get them inside of the church. And they said, why? I said, I don't know. Something. I hear this noise. Get them in now. And as soon as I said that, we started the process of moving all of these kids, and there was quite a few of this youth group. Well, there was an off-duty police officer there, and he said, is everything okay? I said, I don't know, there's something wrong. All of a sudden, within 15 minutes later, all of these cars come flying into the church parking lot, and it was a bunch of gangs, and they had their music going, and it was a really loud sounding bass sound that, the older I get, the less tolerant I am of it. But anyway, they got out of their cars and started running towards us, and all of the kids got inside of the building, but me and this off-duty police officer were the only two, and he went to go get his gun. I'm standing there now in the middle of all of these. They started surrounding me with clubs and chains and stuff, and I'm surrounded by gangs. And if it wasn't for a life of not leaving God alone and crying out for Him, I would have never had the supernatural presence that is on my life, whether I speak to a president or the lowliest person or surrounded by gangs.